All right, I think we can get started if we are live. Um, Hi, everyone. Good evening from wherever you are watching this live stream. This is an About Face live stream, and you are all welcome to join us, and you're all welcome to sit for the next hour with us and hear testimonies from the veterans you just saw on screen about their experience in Palestine and their experience serving in the post 9/11 wars. About Face is a group of anti-war military veterans. I am an About Face member. My name is Arti Walker Betakotla. I am a U.S. Army veteran who served from 2000 to 2006. And tonight is really special because we get to hear from 3 military veterans, all of whom served in the post 9/11 wars, like me, and all of whom have been to Palestine. And they have firsthand accounts of what they saw on the ground in Palestine and how it changed them, both personally and in their activism. Jeff, Eddie, and Ramon will all speak about their firsthand experience serving in the military and being on the ground in Palestine, and also why there isn't a military solution to end the genocide in Palestine. As we are broadcasting this live on social media tonight, there is a week-long telecommunications blackout currently happening in Gaza. It's an Israeli government shutdown, internet shutdown, where internet shutdowns are being used as weapons of war. And they do this because the Israeli government does not want us, the public and the people, to see the genocide that they are committing in Gaza. As of January 18th, today, Israel has murdered at least 24,620 Palestinians and injured more than 61,830 Palestinians in Gaza. There's at least 367 people killed and 4,000 injuries being reported in the West Bank. 85% of Gaza's population has been displaced. 47% of the people displaced are children. There is now forced mass famine with Israel controlling access to medical aid, food, water, medical supplies, and care. It is simple and very plain. What is happening in the occupied Palestinian territories is genocide. The veterans that are on this call are all in agreement that we must end the genocide in Palestine. Many About Face members have been protesting and speaking out against the Israeli occupation of Palestine for years, not just October 7th. A group of veterans, including Ramon and myself, were recently arrested in protest at the Senate office building in Washington, D.C. 6 veterans were arrested, and all of us have been banned from entering Washington, D.C. for the next 6 months as a term of our release and plea deals. The state repression against pro-Palestinian protests is real. As veterans who have served in the U.S. military, we know the cost of war. And we know that there is no military solution to ending this genocide or to ending the settler colonial occupation of Israel. Tonight, you're going to hear from Jeff, Eddie, and Ramon, who will share a testimony of their experience serving in the post 9/11 wars and of their experience on the ground in Palestine. It is our hope that the testimony of military veterans who have experienced both war and seen firsthand the occupation of the Palestinian people and their homeland will help you, the public, understand the urgent need to demand a permanent ceasefire and an end to the occupation of Palestine. We will now start our testimonies with Jeff Camp.
Thank you, Arti. Hey, everyone tuning in. My name is Jeff Camp, and I'm a U.S. Air Force veteran. I served 2007 to 2011, and I deployed to Iraq in 2010. I'm going to share a little bit about my background and my growth, I guess you could say, in my trip to Palestine in 2015 and my experience. And I have notes here and random thoughts, and I don't have a concise speech. So bear with me as I kind of put this together as I go. But a little bit about me. I joined the Air Force when I was 21, and I didn't do it out of any great reason, for any great cause. I did it as really a last kind of ditch effort after I failed at trying some life things before that. It was so let me first say I was born and raised in a town called East Liverpool, Ohio. And not far from East Liverpool, Ohio, is another place you may have heard of recently, East Palestine. It's about 20 minutes or 20 miles ish away from where I grew up. And it's not directly related here, but I think it says something about, where I'm from, so far away from what's happening in Palestine right now, but also so interconnected. My hometown is literally named after Liverpool, England, and Palestine, Ohio, is literally named after Palestine, the Palestinian territories, or the mandate that the British colonial government had over that area after World War One, and before the establishment of the so-called state of Israel in 1948. And more than that, some of the similarities here are that Liverpool is a place in Ohio in the United States, and it's also a place in England. And there's a connection between the U.S. and England, and England and Palestine in particular. And what that connection is really about, it's related to a couple of things, but one of them is about colonialism itself, but also about freedom, and the limits of freedom. But before I get into that, let me back up and say that where I'm from is a rural kind of small town American place, and I was raised with everything that I needed, essentially, but nothing that I really wanted, or better said, I didn't even really know what I wanted. In other words, like I didn't really have any meaningful, solid grounding. I had all my basic needs met, and I had relative freedom to live, to be, but I didn't have any real passion or direction. And I think I floundered between having determination and depression, really, for many years. And it was actually fumbling my way into the military, into the Air Force, that I finally found some type of purpose and meaning in my life, that was substantial, And part of that was through learning how to discipline myself, for better or for worse, something that I really hadn't been forced to do for any type of extensive period up to that point. And not to, glamorize or romanticize that, but it was an important thing for me to be disciplined, in pursuit of something that was bigger than myself or more meaningful. And that held me for a good period. And I literally became something in the military. Like, I joined the military not out of any great patriotic duty or anything like that. Like I said, literally, I was kind of finding my way through the world, and just so happened to be, something to grab onto when I joined was this kind of patriotic, duty, or whatever, however you want to word it. It grounded me into something that was meaningful. And all of these years, essentially, I never had one thought, really, or any type of extensive thought about Palestine or Israel or what that meant. Like, I heard the terms and I knew that there was some type of issue there, but I never dove into that, in part because I was free. I had the freedom and the ability not to think about it, which was part of the problem, and also kind of blissful in a sense. But what I didn't realize was thinking about things like that and understanding how they were related to me really was keeping me blissful and kind of ignorant, but also it prevented me from really finding meaning in my life, that was deeper, that mattered. Um, and so a lot of things happened, and I will spare you all the details of that. But essentially, I deployed to Iraq, and like I said, when I joined the military, I wasn't joining out of patriotic duty or a duty to support the war or whatever. I was just like, the war is happening. I'm trying to, like, kind of be a part of the war, but also not be in danger at the same time. Like, that was kind of my general orientation. I wanted all the glory, but I didn't want to have to risk anything for it. Right? I wanted the freedom to have that, but not to sacrifice anything in a real sense. Which is kind of the theme of my life, but also related to Israel and Palestine, and the direct issue we're facing here. At some point in my military service, I got bored, I think. Essentially, I had a lot of free time, and I had this ability to kind of learn about the world more. And what I did was I took college classes, and I studied and I learned about the world as much as I could. Um, at the same time that I'm really kind of understanding myself in the world and my position in it and how my actions affect the world, I'm faced with this dichotomy of what I'm actually experiencing. And so at some point, my service and my deployment in Iraq, things began to shift into the reality that I thought that I lived in was cracking. And one of the things that really did it for me was when I was deployed, I had to do what's called escort duty. Um, my job in the Air Force, I was a firefighter. Literally, I did what firefighters do on the civilian world most of the time. We just sit around and wait for something to happen, um, which is a great job. But part of what I was forced into do when I was deployed was to do escort duty, which we had to essentially we had to go to the gate and we had to pick up laborers, local Iraqis, um, and we would get them to do menial jobs on the base that we didn't want to do, but we had to get done. Um, so essentially, we were just picking up free labor to do the menial works that we didn't want to do, and we had to do this armed um, with assault rifles and weapons and magazines, and I this is not something I did on a normal day in the Air Force as a firefighter. Even in Iraq, I didn't have a weapon most days, so I had to pick up a weapon in order to escort um, essentially teenage young Iraqi boys who basically were coming from a local village, and they were of a very extreme poverty, and they didn't speak a whole lot of English, but we had numerous conversations as I had to watch them pull weeds or pick up rocks or sweep sand. Um, and and some of those conversations were as simple as just asking me where I'm from and asking me if I had a girlfriend, and um, really just minute everyday things like that. Um, and this was one instance of many others, which I won't go into detail here, but that really connected me to people who I thought completely different of, and realized they were much more like me than I'm being told, or what's being the stories that are being told about them and what they're about and what they're for, and all, etc. Right? So fast forward, after my service, I moved to New York, um, and I began to continue my studies in college. And through living in New York and meeting different people, I met some friends who were Palestinian, and we became very close. And my friend just also happens to be an organizer with an organization called Existence is Resistance, and their organization is all about bringing artists, specifically hip hop artists, um, from the globe to Palestine to see what the occupation looks like, what reality looks like for Palestinians. Um, and they do this through tours, annual tours. And my friend invited me to a tour in 2015. Um, Now I'm not a hip hop artist, but we had to. But I was invited along, and um, I got to experience 3 weeks of living in Palestine. Specifically, we stayed there in Balata refugee camps in Nablus. Um, and what that is that it's a United Nations built camps, temporary living facilities for Palestinians. These were built right after 1948. I was in Palestine in 2015. Um, so these temporary camps have been lived in for over 70 years. Um, and that's where I stayed when I was there. Um, but what there's so many things that I could share and I want to say. Um, but I'll share one other story of my experience in Palestine. One of the most moving stories that happened in Nablus camp. One of our a young guy around my age who lived in Nablus was from there. His best friend was getting married, and he had been showing us around and kind of escorting us around. And this night we go back and he says to us, "I want to take you to my friend's bachelor party." And there were like 5 or 6 of us, other men in the group. And we said, yeah, let's go, of course. So we walked from where we were staying down some very, very narrow alleyways until we start to hear this music playing. And we around the corner, there's like 20, 30 young men in the middle of the street, and there's a young kid on a chair in the air, clearly the bachelor. And so our friend Mahmoud takes us down and introduces us to his friend and his family. And literally, with the first time we've ever met these people, we were there. A couple of the guys performed a few hip hop songs, and then, sorry, I'm realizing I'm a little bit behind time, so I'm going to wrap this up. We performed some hip hop songs that everyone is really happy and enjoyed it. We met the groom's father and mother, groom and his friends, and we were there for maybe an hour and a half or so, and we went to say goodbye to the groom, to the bachelor, groom to be, and then we say goodbye to his father, right? And as we're saying goodbye to his father literally looks at us and says, "No, you guys can't leave." And so we're all looking at each other like, what do you mean we can't leave? Like, we don't understand. We're like a little bit nervous. We don't really understand what's going on. And so he says, "Follow me." And he was a serious guy, and we were outnumbered, and we were just like, all right. He says, "Follow him." Like, I don't know. Let's like, he's been cool to us so far. Let's just see what happens, right? So he takes us inside this 3-story building, is their home, and upstairs we go, 1, 2, 3 floor to the roof. And we get to the rooftop, and he orders us all to sit down. We all sit down, and then he brings in plates of food and drinks and cigarettes for all of us and gives them to us. And then the rest of the party of his family and friends come up to get their food and drinks. So he literally served 6 people that he just had met less than an hour ago and treated us like we were his family. And it was one of the most inspiring experiences of my life. And that's just one of many great moments, and many more harrowing, upsetting moments of my time there and my experience there. But it was something that was very important for me, and I recognize very much the humanity of all the Palestinians, and I sympathize with their struggle and their journey in the face of their experience. That's not to say that there are other bigger issues interconnected, which we don't have time to talk about, but that's just to give a story about why this is important to me and why it matters personally, but also it matters on a bigger, grander scale. And it matters to all of us because this is really an issue not only of human rights individually for Palestinians, but also for really the global safety and security and freedom around the world. But the important thing is that we should all be supporting a ceasefire, and we should really that's really the most important thing we need in this moment. so we can stop and figure out things and move forward. Because at the end of the day, security can never be maintained through threats of violence and force at all. Like, that just doesn't work. And the only way to move forward is figuring out how we live together and struggle together. And the only way we can do that is by stopping like fighting and violence and the killing and ceasefiring immediately. So thank you for your time. I went over a bit, but stick around, and thank you so much.
Okay, I guess I'm on. All right. My name's Eddie Falcone, Omateo Tazakumatye, coming from the occupied territory of the Ohlone people out here in Oakland, California. A United States Air Force veteran, just like Jeff. I served in Iraq, Afghanistan. I did medical evacuations in Hurricane Katrina. And, you know, I think before I went to the military, I had a pretty good U.S. history teacher that taught us a lot about the wars in Vietnam and things like that. You know, the Iraq and Afghanistan wars hadn't started yet. I joined in 2001, actually just before 9/11. But you would think that I would have, getting all that information, would have kind of known that the U.S. just gets itself into any of these wars and other people meddling in people's business all across the world. But I guess I didn't learn my lesson. And I really wanted to get money for school, though, and that's why I joined. I come from an immigrant family, Mexican and also part Native, and I just wanted to get money for school. I wanted to get a leg up in society. I wanted to kind of escape a cycle of violence that was happening around me. And, you know, I think these really kind of are going to feed some of my ideas about the war when I eventually went to war, and about Palestine as well. So I'll get into that. But so I didn't join for any like patriotic reasons or anything like that either. And I didn't think that I was going to have to go to war. But I did end up going to war because 9/11 happened shortly after my 18th birthday in July. And so I ended up, you know, like I said, serving 2 tours in Iraq, 2 tours in Afghanistan, doing some evacuations in Hurricane Katrina. And the things that I had seen there, you know, I saw some connections with some of the struggles that I had seen growing up here in California, and with coming from an immigrant family. You know, like Jeff was talking about how he did some security details. I did something similar. I did these detainee missions. We call them like PUC missions, prisoner under containment, and we would move Iraqi prisoners to and from the prisons in Basra, from Baghdad, and I got to really see like who we were systematically putting in these prisons, and, you know, the inherent racism and just picking up men that all the men, local men, and bringing them in and interrogating them. And, you know, I saw the pictures of Abu Ghraib coming out and hearing about things that were happening in Guantanamo Bay, and realizing that I was a part of this system that systematically brought these men in and interrogated them and tortured them and took them away from their families, coming in the middle of the night. You know, the Army details that brought them onto the plane would tell us about how they picked them up, and raiding people's houses, and telling me, you know, because I wondered, are these the insurgents? Are these the bad guys? And they would tell me, no, these guys were just wrong place, wrong time, you know? And that's how most of them were. And so it really got me thinking, like, you know, I started to see the connections with them, and I had family that got picked up in the middle of the night, thrown in prison, deported back to Mexico, taken away from their families too. I even had an uncle who was murdered by the police. And so I saw like the similarities of my struggle and their struggle. And even when I would take some of the prisoners out of Baghdad and remove the blindfolds from them, they would see me. And when we did these missions, we wore no insignias or anything like that in case we went down, so that people would know who we were. And they thought that I was Arab. They tried to speak to me in Arabic, and I was just like, I'm sorry, I don't speak the language. And then, I would see that like fear in their eyes, like, oh, he's an American. But that also just kind of made me realize, like, I'm on the wrong side of history here, like I'm supposed to be on the side of the people. And that was a big thing that really changed my mind about my position in the wars. And I saw that we were creating a lot of war against the Arab people. Um, and so that started to kind of feed my ideas about Israel and Palestine too. And I didn't really learn about Israel or Palestine in high school. I didn't go to college yet or anything, so I didn't know a lot about it. But and I think that's a thing that happens in today and age. Sometimes when I talk to other people on the street, a lot of people are just like, well, I don't know about that. It's been going on since biblical days and things like that. And I think there's not enough information and education out here in the Western world about what's going on there. And I think that's part of the problem. But, I got involved in political things when I got out of the military. I just knew that I wanted to speak my truth and just protest the war, say that the wars are wrong because they were still going on, and ended up getting involved with a group called Dialogues Against Militarism through Iraq Veterans Against the War, now about Face Veterans Against War. And we went to Israel and Palestine in 2009 to create this documentary called Occupation Has No Future. I believe you could still order it. It's on Barnes and Noble or something, but if you want to see it. But it's from filmmaker David Slutnik. And we went to the West Bank. We went to places like Ramallah, Daesha. We went to Hebron. We even went up to Golan Heights, which is in the north. It's kind of a free territory up there. It's mostly like Druze people up there. But we went around and made this documentary about a lot of things that we saw there. And I think before, going there, like I said, I didn't know exactly everything. And my opinion before I went was not what it was when I came back. And I had seen a lot of history about Palestine before and about some of the resistance movements that had happened there when I was kind of preparing to go. And I was just, thinking, it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what the people on the ground that I met there think. And, most, and maybe I'll get to that when I get to the end. But when we first got there, I think one of the biggest things that just shook me and shook us to the core, the group of people that we were with when we were going from the airport to Daesha. And we didn't even go through there. That was on the way back. But when we were taking a cab and going, we saw the big wall. We saw the big wall between Israel and Palestine. And it just reminded me of the border wall, And again, I felt a lot of this connection with the struggle, and that, that hit me, because that wall is what also separates my people from me and some of my family. And so I see the connections in our struggles again. And I also, we went to the Daesha refugee camp. And again, when I was there, it was pretty funny sometimes. Like, we would be walking around and they're showing us around, a group of Americans, and we're handing out stickers to the little kids. And the little kids were coming, everybody wanted to say hi to us, and the little kids were coming up and like, trying to talk and get stickers. And they were coming up to me, and our guide was showing us around, and he was local Palestinian, and the kids were saying something and they ran away from me, and he's just cracking up laughing. And I was like, well, what did they say? And he goes, they said, no, don't talk to him, leave him alone. He's not American, he's Arab. So it was like kind of funny that they, I just, another thing of like feeling like I was just confirmation that I'm on the right side of things now, as far as my own story and being on the right side of history. And I wanted to be in there in the struggle with the people. But I think another thing that really was so striking was seeing Hebron. You don't know nothing till you see Hebron. It's crazy. Like that's really what apartheid looks like. It is. Woo. There's literally, like, you walk through the marketplace down below, and there's literally cages over the marketplace, and you think those cages are to maybe to separate the Palestinians from the Israelis who live above, but that's not what they're there for. The cages are there. The Palestinians put them up to protect themselves because the Israelis were throwing stuff down at them. And so they put those cages up to protect, and there's chairs, and hopefully I'll be able to upload some pictures after this, if this video gets uploaded of this. There's like broken chairs, TV sets, rocks. They even started, the tour guide was telling us they started filling up bags of pee and throwing them so that they would bust on people. And while I was there, I even got sand got thrown at me while I was there too. And it's horrible. It's really like, it's apartheid there. You're down here, we're up here. And when you go out of the marketplace, there's a road out there. And well, the Israelis have a road. The Palestinians have a little sidewalk that they can walk on and to get to their houses. So they can't use the road. And the way that the doors are set up, you can't get from one side to the other because you have to use the road. So people have to literally like bust holes through their houses. And so you see these holes in the walls so that people can get from one place to another. And I saw kids climbing up and down ropes, like just to get down to their neighbor's house or whatever, their other family's house, because they can't use the road. And it's literally like, it's just totally separate. And what the Palestinians have it's not equal. It's like they get a little slice and they have to navigate their lives with that. So it's really shocking to see. And so that was one thing that really affected us when we were there. Trying to look at my notes here. And another thing was, seeing the checkpoints as well. The checkpoints there was also shocking. And, there's checkpoints. You think of military checkpoints, like you drive a car up, there's a checkpoint, that's one. But there's some where there's people who go to work. They go between different towns in the West Bank and stuff like that. And so the checkpoints to go back home, it's like these big, long, snaking lines of people just trying to get back home. And they say it takes them, we interviewed some of the people there, and they're talking about how it takes hours sometimes just to get back home. And, when we went through the checkpoints as Americans, like there's cameras and things, and we can look up there and like say hello and like show our passport or something, and they'll just open the gates and let us through. Like they know that they're just messing with them. And so that was really striking to see too, because these people have to take hours just to get to and from these different places. It really interrupts their lives. And, we went to Nilin, we went to Bilin, and went to some of the protests against the wall. I mean, I haven't talked too much about the Israelis that we met. There's Israeli anarchists against the wall. There's people who are in the refuseniks. There's people who are in breaking the silence. It's these people who've served in the IDF that are against the occupation. So that was pretty cool to see that. So, I hope people know that there are people who live in Israel who are against the occupation and are trying to fight against the wall. And I think that's one thing that our documentary is trying to show, that there's people that are fighting alongside each other for peace. And, there's no military solution to this. And from my own experience being in Katrina, like when we went there, the military went to handle things in Katrina. We waited like 6 days to get there, but we just made things worse. And we, when they say people got displaced by Hurricane Katrina, like we literally displaced them. Like I put people in my plane and took them from New Orleans and took them to Kentucky, like a totally different state, and they didn't even know they were going. We just had their bag on them and just wanted to get out of there and didn't know where they were going. And so the military just doesn't do the situation any good. And I will also say that from most of what I saw there on the ground and the people that I talked to, the people in Palestine, most of them have said that they just want equal rights. Because a lot of times people talk about two state, one state, another, all these different states, but they just want equal rights under the state that's there. They could all live in peace together and just be under the same state as long as they got equal rights. I mean, that's what I learned when I was there. And so I think might be running out of time for myself to share. So with that said, I will go ahead and pass it back to the facilitator and just remind you guys to stay tuned with About Face Veterans Against the War. We're calling for a ceasefire. We're calling for all U.S. to stop their funds to Israel. When we were there, people were talking about the boycott, divestment, and sanction movement was something that the people on the ground in Palestine were telling us to support, to do, so that there's no more money, no more guns, funding, things like that going to Israel to hurt the Palestinian people. So I think that should probably do it for me. Thank you. Peace.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Ramon Mejia. I'm from Dallas, Texas. Really appreciate being able to share space with you all, with my co-speakers, with Eddie and Jeff. I kind of wanted to just be able to just start from the beginning. I think I'm from Dallas. I'm from a community known as called Oak Cliff, and working class family. Growing up, my parents worked really hard to try and give us as much as we could. And, by the time I was in high school, working multiple like part-time jobs and just trying to graduate, trying to figure things out. I got married in senior year of high school in 2000. I had a daughter. And, when I was graduating in 2001, I felt that I needed something that was secure for my family, something that would help with healthcare benefits, with having a good paying job, because at this time 2 part-time jobs weren't going to cut it with a new baby on the way. So I joined the military. I joined the Marines. I felt that was one of my only solutions, but definitely, like, looking back, and even to this day, definitely always tell folks that there are other, sustainable options for youth that don't rely you having to join the military in order to just be able to provide for yourself. And before I, kind of move on from there, I remember, when I was 17, when I first got introduced to Palestine, I remember I was just sitting on the couch right there with my dad, and my dad was watching the news, watching the Spanish news station. And then came up like images of Palestinians throwing rocks, against military personnel, against soldiers. I didn't know who they were, but I was like, I was watching it. I was like, oh, what's going on there? How come, why are they fighting? And my dad, he didn't say much. He never really talked much about politics, but he knew then that what was happening was wrong, and he was, they're defending themselves. They're treated badly. Speaking about Palestinians, so that always was something that I always kept in the back of my mind of what my dad told me. Now, when we were right there sitting on the couch. Needless to say, like, I joined the military in 2001. I went up to boot camp in July of 2001. So it was during Marine Corps boot camp that September 11th happened. And then, the war on terror began, in the way the U.S. Began to wage war, against Afghanistan. Ultimately, I thought that that's where a lot of us that were in boot camp at the time, thinking, oh, we're going to be getting sent to Afghanistan. but we never were, right? We continued through training, and they continued to tell us, you're getting ready to go, you're getting ready to go, we're getting ready to go. And then ultimately ended up not ever going to Afghanistan, but being part of the initial invasion of Iraq in 2003. I was a resupply convoy specialist and was trained in, took machine gunners course in order to be able to conduct resupply convoys throughout the country. So I got to see what war and occupation looked like, up close and personal, seeing the utter devastation that we brought to the Iraqi people. In the lead up to it, they were telling us that we were, we're going to Iraq to get rid of tyranny, but all I saw was a trillions of dollars of military equipment and a militarized force, essentially, taking control of a country. So after leaving Iraq, through like self-reflection and trying to like really understand like my own role and participation in a devastating war that continues to like harm and hurt people till this day. I left the war, but very much so a lot of people were impacted by Iraq and continue to be impacted to this day. In leaving the Marine Corps and in the years after, as I was trying to process my experience and really come to terms with it, I self-reflected and I started to learn more about Islam, learn more about Muslims, wanting to learn more about the faith and the religion that so many people had told us in the lead up to the war and even while we were in Iraq, that they were our enemy. And in the process, I didn't see an enemy. I saw, a new way of living, and it provided me a structure. And I ended up converting and making my shahada in 2008, in the fall of 2008. So in that community of where I made my shahada, when I converted to Islam, it was a large Palestinian community as well. And so very much so, like they became very close friends of mine. And, these were folks that accepted me, as someone that was new to the community and were loving and generous and just wanted to be able to be a community and an anchor for me. So, here I am into this community that I'm being made a part of and welcomed. Operation Cast Lead is happening, happens in that winter of 2008, where a massive 22-day military assault on Gaza was happening. Unprecedented. Again, prior to that, over 1,400 Palestinians were killed in that operation. Overwhelmingly, a majority of them civilians, and that was my introduction really to the Palestinian solidarity movement, to be able to see that, here I was on one side experiencing war as an occupier in Iraq. And then now I'm part of a community and these are friends and family who are telling me about how their family in Gaza is being treated, how, in the West Bank and throughout, even within 48 of the way that the treatment of the Palestinian people. So I wanted to learn more. I wanted to be able to, make right of the wrongs that I did when I was in Iraq, wanting to oppose U.S. militarism and the funding of the war on terror, throughout the globe. So I became really active in Palestinian solidarity work and on the college campus and also within my community. And then also in 2011, joined About Face Veterans Against the War, or at the time it was known as Iraq Veterans Against the War. And it was through my membership within About Face that I got a chance to travel to Palestine. About Face is a member of Grassroots Global Justice Alliance, an alliance of over like 60 grassroots community organizations across Turtle Island that are building, are engaged in a long-term process of relationship building, of political development and alignment, transformational like leadership development. So there was an opportunity to to go on a delegation to Palestine in 2018, and be able to build with and hold conversations with Palestinian grassroots community groups there throughout various sectors of society. And so as a representative and a member of About Face, representing this alliance of this diverse alliance from across Turtle Island, that, you know, folks that were engaged in housing justice and immigrant rights and food sovereignty, in anti-police brutality and abolition work. You know, I had a chance to go on this delegation and represent this alliance with an organization that has been engaged with community there for, you know, for decades, since 1983, and so they're in 1980s, where they build, you know, the long-term partnerships with Global South movement organizations and build like values and visioning around what are the rights to land, to water, to food, you know, to climate justice, you know, basically facilitating connections between folks here within the belly of the beast on Turtle Island, and then those in the Global South and those that are impacted by U.S. war and militarism, like Palestinians, right? Like those, you know, wanting to throw off the boot of the occupier in their land. So I traveled to Palestine in 2018. You know, from the moment that I landed in Tel Aviv, I was profiled, I was harassed. You know, I was kept in confinement for up to 7 hours in this like clear glass room as folks are going through customs. There's this huge like glass room that's visible to everybody, that's like off to the side, and then that's where everybody that's been put into like secondary screening. Needless to say, all the folks that are in there are either Muslim or Arab looking, or from communities that are marginalized by the Israeli occupation, by the government. So I was held there for up to 7 hours. I was questioned, and I was like, you know, harassed and you know, wanting to find out why I was going to Palestine, why was I there, you know, wanting to know about my rationale for wanting to be there. Why was I by myself? You know, just basically being profiled as a Muslim, being profiled as someone that, you know, it didn't matter that I was a U.S. citizen. It didn't matter that I was a veteran. It mattered that I was there as part of wanting to build a genuine solidarity and movement with Palestinian people. And you know, I'd want to go as deeply as in detail as that would be helpful, and be able to share about all the amazing people, the amazing organizations that are working directly with Palestinian women and girls, with children, with peasant farmers, with systems impacted people, right? Prisoner networks, you know, civil society activists, that, you know, a lot of amazing people that are, you know, providing direct research services and monitoring and exposing like human rights violations and abuses by the Israeli occupying forces. But just like their and the way that students and academics and organizations are targeted here in the U.S. And harassed, you know, it's important to acknowledge that security is also an issue, and wanting to safeguard folks that are doing really, really amazing work from being harassed and targeted. You know, Eddie shared a little bit about Al Khalil, or, you know, Hebron, and yeah, that's definitely like a city that defines like militarized occupation. You know, there's over 300 settlers, maybe even more by now, but at the time, I remember when we went, there was like over 300 settlers that were being protected by over 5,000 you know, Israeli occupying soldiers. They're, you know, they're everywhere. I remember visiting. We visited a family where, you know, many of their family members had been murdered by the Israeli occupying soldiers, and then, but also had free limits to their house, through their home. The military had barricaded portions of the family's homes where they only had a small like living quarter. They were forced to keep their houses unlocked at all times. The soldiers would come in day and night, however they pleased. You know, and Eddie was sharing about how, well, the settlers are on top, and, you know, they would throw down trash and other debris and rocks, and, you know, to try and injure Palestinians that are in the marketplace. At the time, the marketplace was shut down now. Like you couldn't even, there was nobody there. But it's because the settlers are, taking people's homes and are they're on top of other Palestinians, living literally on top of Palestinians. And then you have the soldiers and the watchtowers that are over them, looking down on them. And it's essentially, how Palestinians there understood it is that, settlers and the occupiers were stealing house from house, block from block, stealing, every house that they can, and that they wouldn't stop until they took everything. I remember going on the rooftops, and you have like these huge cylinders, like water tanks, where the water is collected. Obviously, that's the way that the water system is there. But as you go up, there's a number of water tanks that have a bunch of holes in them that you could see that they've been they've been shot out, and so now they have like all these Palestinian homes that are repeatedly having to replace tanks, and settlers are constantly shooting holes in it. Right. I remember visiting the mosque there and being profiled, being the Israeli military always asking myself and my Palestinian comrades, like, our IDs, wanting to know where we were at, where we were going, everywhere we went, right? Going into the Jordan Valley and going to Tana near Nablus, where families are live in caves because their entire villages have been demolished. So they were forced to, even live in caves, because if they left, then that would be a reason for the Israeli forces to be able to basically, take the land away from them, right? I went to the Aida refugee camp, where thousands of Palestinians were displaced during the Nakba in 1948, and were forced and have been living there since. I learned that the refugee camp there was one of the most tear gas communities in the world. The psychological and physical impacts that has on people, on families, on children. There was this craft store on the side that actually sold jewelry and little like earrings and little like keepsakes out of the tear gas canisters. That's just the amount that was being like shot out. I know I only have a minute or so left, and I just want to just be able to say that, what I also learned there is that the Palestinian people are steadfast and are committed to resist against all odds the face of oppression, right? That it doesn't matter the daily struggles or the dehumanizing treatment that Palestinians endure at the hands of the Israeli occupying force. They're going to continue to rise and continue to oppose this military occupation, this genocide that's happening in Gaza, right? It's part of a long trajectory that even the Israelis themselves, Israeli prime minister utilizes the rhetoric of the war on terror as a reason to continue to be a part, to wage war, wage genocide on the Palestinian people. And I'll end with kind of just with the words that he said just a few days ago. Benjamin Netanyahu said that nobody will stop us, not the Hague and not the axis of evil, and not anybody else. Who else uses the axis of evil rhetoric, right? So it's definitely like call to action is to oppose the genocide that's happening in Gaza, and the occupation of Palestine, and the U.S. military funding and diplomatic cover of the Israeli occupying forces to engage in the slaughter of the Palestinian people. So I'll just end there.
I want to thank Ramon, Eddie, and Jeff so much, and express deep gratitude to all of them for sharing their deeply personal experiences with us. Talking about your military experience, for those of you who are veterans joining us on the call, that that's not an easy thing to do. And so I really want to deeply thank them for sharing their experiences with us so that we can become stronger in our fight. I also want to add, to end this call, I want to add a little bit of perspective from my own perspective as a military veteran and a queer abolitionist feminist. I want to acknowledge the interconnected struggle of militarism and imperialism, both here and in the US globally. This is a struggle that is rooted in the understanding of the settler colonial state and fighting against militarism locally in our communities, because many of our local police departments are trained by the Israeli Defense Forces, and nationally against the Department of Defense and its ballooning budget, and globally against US militarism and imperialism. I also want to acknowledge from a feminist perspective, and I can't say it better than my fellow sister comrade Nadine Neber's words, so I'm going to quote Nadine. Palestinian feminists have been exposing, resisting, and shaping a world beyond the heteropatriarchal violence that is foundational to the Israeli settler colonial project, while demanding on a global stage that the Palestinian struggle is a feminist and a reproductive justice issue. Just this week, there are reports that show a 300% increase in the rate of miscarriage of pregnant Palestinians in Gaza. Genocide takes many forms, and we must consider all of the perspectives that have been shared here tonight, from a feminist, from an imperialist, from a settler colonialist perspective, as we struggle in the fight to demand a permanent ceasefire, an end to the occupation of Palestine, and an end to the US funding of the genocide in Palestine and the US funding to Israel. Jeff, Eddie, Ramon, myself, and so many other veterans agree that there is no military solution to peace and justice and to ending this genocide in Palestine. So we need you, if you're still listening and you're here with us still, we need you to keep demanding for a permanent ceasefire. We're going to link in the comments, and we'll provide these links on social, to a Veterans for Ceasefire toolkit that we've put together. In that toolkit, you will find many actions that you can take, including actions of calling your representatives and emailing them, because we know that those calls and that pressure is working. You can join Jewish Voices for Peace daily power half hours, which are really great ways to stay connected, even when you're feeling in despair. About Face, if you're a veteran, we have ceasefire organizing calls that you can join, and I believe that they're every other Sunday. So you can join other veterans that are like-minded, and you can find out ways that you can join in the fight to demand a ceasefire. I want to thank Eddie, Jeff, and Ramon again. Thank you all for joining us, and free Palestine.